I'm Tom Kaechele. I'm the director of Spectrum Theater, and I'm lucky enough today to talk to Dr. P.M. Forni, who is the author of the book Choosing Civility, the 25 Rules of Considerate Conduct. Welcome.
I'm delighted to be here, Tom. Thank you.
You've been having fun since you've arrived here. We've been keeping you busy.
Yes, very busy, but pleasant, in a very pleasant way.
All right. Well, I was thrilled to be able to get the chance to talk to you, and got a few questions. I guess we should just start right off. Do you think a civility class should be a required course at the college level, or is it maybe too late by that time?
I think it would be a very useful course. It is true, as you say, that it's better to start as early as possible, and there is no real substitute for the teaching of good manners that takes place in the first 10 years of life. However, since many of our students today come to the campus without a clear set of expectations, horizon of expectations, a good class that would teach them the basics of that form of gracious goodness that is civility would be a welcome addition.
That makes sense, yeah. I noticed you stated at the beginning of your book that we live in, I think you called it a hero-less age. And I checked back at the copyright because I thought, now, how current is this? It's been 8 years, I think, since you've written the book.
Yes, indeed.
Now, do you think that we have discovered some civil heroes more recently, or do you think that that statement of being in a hero-less age still?
I think that at any given time we can pick one or two or three or four even representatives of our times that have done something right, that have distinguished themselves in the fields, in many fields, humanitarian ones in particular. But without looking for one or two, I would say that to a large extent ours is still a hero-less age, because we are so occupied with ourselves. We are so preoccupied with our everyday lives, and we are so dominated by the culture of television and the media that we don't seem to have the need for a hero in the old sense of the world, and that is certainly a pity. I think that when I say that we are in a hero-less age, I mean that we are in an age in which we don't seem to mourn for the demise of the good guys.
You mentioned that we're kind of self-absorbed, and this age. I thought it was interesting. I was reading this book real close to the political season here. And so I spent a lot of time watching MSNBC and Fox News, getting the right and the left. But when I watch those, I kind of think, isn't it possible that we might be fighting a losing battle when it comes to civility? Because when I watch those two networks, civility seems to be thrown completely out the window as we try to talk over each other. And they seem to be, battling for the hearts and minds of Americans.
Those are extreme cases, I think, of interaction when it comes to incivility. And they are about the political process, and they are about the fact that even in the political arena, in a democratic system, conflict is necessary. I am not so scandalized by the fact that there is some sharp disagreement in these commercials, because it is dictatorships where there is no conflict on the political horizon. We need a certain amount of conflict and even a spirited exchange of opinions. It is true, however, that the tones go very often from the spirited to the outright outrageous when it comes to incivility. But I wouldn't pay too much attention to it. We know that certain television networks have become spectacle, and
Right.
we consider that not real news, but really spectacle. And I think that our youngsters are able to distinguish between a broadcast that is seriously about the news and another show that is really about sensationalizing and exaggeration and obnoxious behavior to raise the ratings of the show.
So you think it's more for entertainment purposes that
Yes,
the,
that's right. It's a form of professional wrestling with words.
Right, right. And it's gotten to that point where, you know, it used to be one person talking to another person, them arguing back and forth, and now it's gotten to the point where they actually put 4 people on the screen and they all try to talk over.
And all try to talk over one another. And I think that many youngsters, and I'm still talking about the youngsters because they are the ones that have to survive this in order not to become totally disaffectioned about the system. They are able to distinguish. They don't pay much attention, I think, to a divided screen in which 4 pundits or pseudo-pundits are debating in a way that is really not serious news.
So they can separate the wheat from the chaff,
Yes,
so to speak.
I'm sure they can in many cases.
Now, you said the younger people, so that brings up, I got 4 kids, and early in the book you talk about sometimes in order to achieve happiness we must forego fun. And I'm trying to think, how are you going to help me convince my kids that that's the case?
Well, if you are not afraid of talking about sex to your children when they are age appropriate, you can explain to them that, for instance, having unprotected sex can give you a moment of fun, but you can pay that moment of fun with a life of consequences, and those consequences will hinder your ability to become very happy. And so I think that if you are willing to present your child with what happens when we choose fun over a long time alternative that we can call happiness, there is a price to be paid.
Okay.
And an unwanted pregnancy, other consequences, they may be in following that unwanted pregnancy, there is the dropping out of school, and that means lowering your expectations for the future, and so on and so forth, health issues and so on. And so I think there are many examples that one can present to youngsters that they will understand.
So it's encouraging them to take that moment to reflect before they act.
Before acting, yes.
Okay.
Thinking before speaking, thinking before acting, that's the right thing to do, and it can make the difference between in what essentially is your destiny.
Gotcha. All right. Now, one of your guideposts is to assert yourself, okay? And another is to encourage self-control. And are they sometimes just mutually exclusive? I'm thinking for my kids in school getting bullied. I mean, you have the idea that you can turn the other cheek, but sometimes they feel better when it comes to self-esteem if they do the eye for an eye routine.
And civility is not about turning the other cheek necessarily.
Okay.
It's about stopping the hand, the fist that is going to hurt you, instead of hurting the other person with your own fist. That's what assertiveness is, and that's what is civil. Now, you can turn the other cheek, but that's the way to sainthood more than anything else.
Okay.
The fact that I put the rule on being assertive in my book is something new. Books of manners, books of conducts, until 10 or 15 years ago, would not have such a rule, because we used to think that the good manners and civility are something that we do for others and not for ourselves, and instead of being assertive is something that you do for yourself.
Right.
But I'm convinced that in order to be that there is no conflict between being assertive and being civil. I think that civility requires today a degree of assertiveness. And it is also our self-esteem that requires that.
Right.
And when we are assertive, we are not being violent or aggressive. We are simply telling other people how far they can push the envelope with us.
So it's not a matter of eye for an eye. It's stop it before it gets to that point.
Stop
That's
before
where
it gets to that point, and let me tell you how far I will let you go with your pushing the envelope with me.
Okay.
And it's a way of being, of clarifying your expectations. We teach others how to treat us by how much we are willing to endure from them. And so you don't want to endure too long or too much,
right,
because you send a wrong message of a lack of self-respect.
Okay.
And people will respect you only to the extent that you are able and willing to respect yourself.
All right. Well, that kind of leads me to my next question, which the rule about avoid personal questions, I think it's an interesting one, but sometimes it's difficult to follow, because sometimes you see a person, you think, okay, this person might be in trouble. I might need to ask a personal question to get to that, and if I fail to ask the question, I come off as uncaring.
You're right, and especially in your role as a teacher,
right,
I think you have to use with judgment that rule. That rule is made mostly for questions that could be obtrusive, that could be infringing upon the privacy of the other person. If in your role as a teacher especially, you know your students, and you see that the student of yours is adopting a behavior that is unlikely for him, I think that you are perfectly in your right to say something. Is everything right with you, John or Mary? You seem to be down. I hope that you're all right. And you're not asking any questions by doing that. You're just voicing something that you're noticing.
Okay.
I noticed this, and I trust that you're well.
All right.
And then it is up to the other person to confide in you if they want to.
All right. So that's an invitation as opposed to a request.
Yes, it's opening a door to communication.
All right. So you can
But,
open the door and just not force the other person through it.
That's right. And if you say just simply, I trust that you're well, I want to believe that you are not in any way ill, and that is an opening that the other person may take or not, but you have done what you were supposed to do.
All right, good. I love the chapter on culture shock, but made me start to think about how this place is different. I came here as a student in the 80s, and I think the longer I'm here as a teacher, the more different the students now today seem than the way I grew up. My wife and I will go to the movies, and we'll see people flipping open their cell phone and and texting, and just that light to me is one of the most annoying things.
Right.
I'm trying to watch a movie, but as I look around, it doesn't seem to bother any of the rest of you know, the people besides, you know, people like my wife and I. So I wonder, are we right to necessarily prescribe certain behaviors when they don't seem to matter quite as much to that next generation?
I think that sometimes it is a form of self-respect to do so. I think that, for instance, if you are in a restaurant where a family lets loose its children running from one table to the next and being disruptive, you are perfectly in your right to do something about it, to call a waiter, to call somebody in charge, or even talk to the father or mother of those children. Now, the fact that other people may not be bothered or pretend not to be bothered matters up to a certain point, because you're bothered, and in this case, you would be properly bothered. I mean, it would not be improper of you to be disappointed by the behavior of these youngsters, aided and abetted by their parents.
Right, but it's that question about, you know, it's sort of like a cultural sensitivity. Is it, you know, because I'm bothered, this is improper behavior? I mean, it doesn't seem, you know, situations like that, I think, well, maybe it's just me. Do you know what I mean?
Well, you have to exercise your judgment.
Okay.
In certain cases, it'd be just you.
Mm-hmm.
All of us have pet peeves.
Right.
And we tend to perceive when it comes to our pet peeves, we tend to perceive the infraction of the other person as being much larger or a larger entity than it is.
A felony instead of a misdemeanor.
Yes,
right.
that's right.
Okay,
Very
gotcha.
well put.
All right.
So we have to be mindful and monitor ourselves when it comes to our pet peeves.
Right.
But a restaurant is not an amusement park. And by expecting that children will not be unruly but will be quietly sitting at their table, it is a reasonable expectation, in my opinion. And you can demand that.
All right, good. I mentioned the cell phones earlier today when you were talking. You I think you referred to it as a tether.
Yes, we are tethered to
technology tether, right?
Yes.
Is there actually a way of taking that same technology and using it as a way to enhance civil behavior as opposed to, you know, it becoming one of the big problems with that behavior?
Well, I think that we do that every day. We don't use the internet just to make it the dismal collector of the toxins of the moral toxins of our society. Mm-hmm. We use it in constructive ways. Whenever we write blogs, there are many bloggers who blog about civility and good manners.
Right.
There are dozens and even hundreds of blogs of that sort. Mm-hmm. And so that in and of itself is an example of an alternative use of the internet, different from the forms that we find more objectionable.
Right. Right.
So, and I'm sure that just as millions of messages are exchanged today with obscene threats, obscene behavior, verbal behavior and threats and so on and so forth, there are many messages that are the paragon of politeness.
So it's more the way, just the way you're going to use it, like most inventions.
Yes,
there is a good reason for the invention, and sometimes it can be twisted and used for a way that might not be quite as
The
appropriate.
internet is just like any other tool.
Okay.
Is a car good or is a car bad?
Right.
The car can be used to take a pregnant woman and a child to the hospital and save both their lives. And the car can be used to drive off the road another car and kill the driver. The car is an instrument and it's only good as the use that we make of it. And the same is true for the internet.
And we just got to be careful what we make of that.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you begin one of your last chapters with the question, why are we rude? And I was, as I looked at what you'd written, I thought, well, I wonder if part of the problem lies in our DNA, that we're like pre-programmed to be sort of a Darwinist survival of the fittest kind of person, and that most of the stuff that I'm reading in your book is an element of humanism, that idea that you got to care about the broader group. And I'm thinking that seems to be one of those things that needs to be taught. Do you agree with that? Is
Tom, think of it. We are the inheritors of the genes of two kinds of ancestors back in the depth of prehistorical times.
Okay.
We are the inheritors of the genes who clobbered their enemy and had sexual congress with their women, and therefore their genes continued their travel, their journey in history. But we are also the inheritors of the genes of the ancestor of ours who, at the end of a hunting day, gave part of his prey to the fellow hunter who had not gotten anything from that day, the collaborator, the person who was willing to share. And as a consequence of that, during a similar situation for himself, your inheritor, the person from whom you inherit the genes, was helped in return by the person who had benefited in the exchange, of the prey, and that could be used by him and his family to survive.
So it was a symbiotic kind of
Yes, that's right. So we are the inheritors of the violent person who made his DNA go a long way by being violent and killing.
We're around because our ancestors were winners, is what you're saying.
And, or that they were sharers.
Okay.
And so the trick in our lives is to make prevail in our behavior the behavior of the sharers rather than the behavior of the killers.
Gotcha. All right. Now, my two favorite rules, or I don't know if I can call them my favorites, but the ones I thought, okay, 25 is too many for me to try to focus on. Let me try to narrow it down. I thought, okay, I'm going to go with the first two. Acknowledge the other person and pay attention. And I find myself easily not following those. I'll be at the computer and somebody will come in and I'll continue with it. And I thought, okay, you're not paying attention. You're not even acknowledging that the other person is there, except for verbally. So I'm, taking my time and doing that. But I was curious. Are there favorites that you have in this? Are all 25 equal?
No, I don't think they are.
Okay.
My favorite are the ones that you have mentioned, as a matter of fact.
Really?
They are my same favorite because they are the staple ones. They are the ones from which all others follow. Everything, when it comes to considerate behavior, follows from paying attention, from a benevolent consciousness, acknowledgement of the presence of the other person, of the existence of the other person, from telling ourselves and the other person, I notice that you exist and it matters to me.
Right.
This is the beginning of civility. This is the beginning of attention. This is the beginning of the behavior that we call pro-social. Noticing that the other person and makes it matter to us. Everything else follows this.
All right, that makes. I was right after I had read that section. I had left I had to go to a meeting and a little busy and a little full of myself. And I took off and I blew past one of our custodians. And I think I maybe got about 90 seconds further down, and I suddenly thought, I just broke the first rule. And I turned around and I came back to him and I said, I apologize for walking past you like you did not exist. And it kind of took him aback. He said, well, I just assumed you you were busy. And I said, well, I was, but that's not an excuse for the behavior. So this book has actually done one good thing for
This
for me.
reminds me of an old saying: always be polite to everybody.
Okay.
You will please some people, and you will surprise everybody else.
There you go. All right. Well, it has been a pleasure talking to you, Dr. Forni. Thank you very much for
Tom.
coming to our campus.
Thank you for inviting me. All the
right.
best to you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.